Hi, it's Mel, and welcome back to How We Homeschool. Today's video is going to be part 3 in our 5-part series on the different homeschooling styles. So this is going to be covering the Montessori method. For those of you who don't know, Maria Montessori is a teacher who developed her method in the 20th century, so it's relatively modern. And she was originally developing her teaching style in order to benefit children who were generally atypical. So those of us who deal with learning disabilities or focusing issues, that kind of thing. Her style was geared towards them originally, but then she ended up adapting it for general use because it seemed so beneficial for young children in general. The ideal classroom, according to her, would have been essentially identical to a fully functioning household, only adapted to a child's needs and focuses. So it would incorporate quite a bit of the tools, manipulatives, toys, all of that stuff that would allow the child to learn on their level by doing things hands-on. It's very I don't want to say unstructured because there is a structure inherent to it, but there's very little like formal lecture time. It's not generally up to the teacher to like pull the child along. It's very, very much a child-led learning style, but the ideal is allowing the children to have space and time to work with their tools, to work with their manipulatives, and sort of reflect on what's there for them to learn without the teacher necessarily hovering over them and dragging it along. It's not necessarily very reading intensive, so that can be a benefit to anybody who really struggles with reading, or conversely doesn't necessarily have an issue in reading but generally is able to get things to stick a little bit better if they're doing hands-on methods along with whatever they're learning. Now, that being said, in order to be an official Montessori teacher, you actually do need to complete training. That's not necessarily a negative. You might actually find the training really, really helpful. I actually very much enjoyed doing Montessori method with Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for my kids, and I found that it actually helped me quite a bit in terms of adapting what we were already learning at home into a different style for any of my kids that just seemed like they needed more hands-on. So that's not a negative. It might actually be a benefit, but you just should be aware that if you're planning on calling yourself a Montessori official homeschooler, there is some training involved. That being said, you're fully free to adapt this and incorporate the style without actually becoming official. And all you would need to do in order to do that is, find a way to experience it for yourself or read up in some books and make it work. This is really good for people who value that child-led approach to learning, people with children with special needs, atypical children, anyone who values a lot of like hands-on or sensory learning styles. It's also really, really adaptable and flexible, and it can be incorporated to learning different subjects too. So this would include things like science, like cooking, which also involves science and mathematics, cleaning, math, writing, reading, music. All of that stuff can be incorporated in some kind of Montessori style. So it's very doable. If you dislike the emphasis on like academic rigor or the typical learning at a desk situation, this might be a really good approach for you. If you dislike cookie cutter approaches to learning, you feel like your child doesn't fit super well into the box, this might be a good fit for you. Or if you dislike that really heavy imposed structure of a traditional school. Okay, the downside of this is that because it's such a hands-on method, it can become overwhelming, or it can become an investment in order to like outfit your entire house with child-sized versions of all of the tools and manipulatives that they might use. So if you're incorporating your children in the kitchen, for example, and doing cooking lessons and allowing them to learn to do things on their own, you want to make sure that you have like child-safe knives and things of that nature. So that's not necessarily over the top expensive, but if you're doing that in like every room of the house, then it can become an investment. So this is one of the reasons why Montessori style classrooms and schools are actually relatively popular, is that it allows them to experience the Montessori style, but the school generally will have a higher budget than you personally. It's doable. You can still recreate it at home. You just have to start getting a little bit creative and maybe prioritizing like what you invest in first. You can also make a lot of the supplies that you can use. Aside from the investment issue, one of the other downsides is that if your child happens to be one of those ones that really thrives on the challenge or thrives on the rigor of regular academia, or really just wants that imposed structure in order to function well, this might not be as much of a fit. That's not to say that they can't learn in this, but they might thrive more or push themselves more in a different kind of environment. All right. So anyway, that is Maria Montessori in a nutshell. I hope that's helpful. And the next video, that's going to be Homeschooling Styles number 4, is going to be essentially school at home. So we'll cover that in number 4. Thanks. This is Mel, and this is how we homeschool.